Odysseus winced, one hand at the helm of the ship and the other clutched around his skull. He could still hear the song of the sirens they'd encountered a few nights prior, and, like the ringing of tinnitus, it was there whenever the waves quietened. He still wasn't sure what was real and what wasn't, for those seductive she-devils had done a number on him, hovering at the edge of the ship and singing their bittersweet songs. He'd made sure the rest of the crew had stuffed beeswax in their ears so they couldn't hear it, but he'd willingly chosen to listen, because he was curious as to whether the tales were true. Indeed, they were true, and he'd have gone falling for any one of them if he hadn't had the crew tie him to the ship's mast, unable to move. He'd screamed for them to free him, but maybe it was just as well they hadn't heard him. Still, his head was on fire, and it hurt to even think for more than a moment. He sure had no intention of hearing their songs ever again, that was certain. He shook his head free of the thoughts. After all, he needed his wits about him now. "Can I interest you in a drink, sir?" Eurylochus stood beside him, calm as you'd like, slowly filling up a glass with red wine. If he had to tell his first mate no again, he'd probably shove him overboard. He didn't like to drink when on board. The last time he'd done that, he'd nearly rammed the ship against the shore and marooned the whole crew. But that didn't stop Eurylochus from trying. "No, thank you." He gently pushed the glass away, and Eurylochus looked at him with his flat, emotionless face, and just shrugged, knocking it back himself. Odysseus supposed he couldn't blame him, given their situation now. This voyage was certainly shaping up to be an accursed one at best. The ship moved slowly, carefully inching forward as they let down the sail for a moment's breather. A streak of white light was strewn across the rippling blue waters, courtesy of the raging sun above, bringing with it a heat that had most of his men pacing about the deck shirtless and sweating. But Odysseus couldn't enjoy any of the grand weather, nor did he suspect his crew was, as they gathered before him in an orderly sort of cluster, about as orderly as they got, anyway. "It seems like we have two choices," Eurylochus was saying, as he slurped the wine and pointed over to the right, where a sheer chalk-white cliff towered over the ship. There was a scar-shaped crack in the cliff wall, and out from that crack spilled what Eurylochus had called Scylla. And by the gods, was it a beast! It had to have been at least twice the size of his ship, with 6 serpent-like heads that were moving as erratically as the waves, never still. From this distance, which wasn't necessarily far at all, it looked as if every head was hysterically laughing at them, bobbing left and right as its razor-sharp teeth snapped open and closed. In amongst those 6 heads, however, was the haggard, misshapen head of a giant woman who looked dazed for the most part, eyes rolling back, languidly moving left and right. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Its body was a misshapen thing, all a sickly green colour with the sagging, wrinkling skin of an old woman,